My name is Margaret. I'm 68 years old. I've worked as a cleaner for nearly 40 years. Hospitals, schools, offices. For the past 12, I've been cleaning the headquarters of Braxton and Rowe Logistics, one of those shiny high-rises with glass doors that never need fingerprints to open because people like me are always behind the scenes wiping them away. I start at 5 a.m. every weekday. The security guards know me by name. Some of the execs don't even make eye contact. But I never minded. It was honest work. It kept food on our table when my husband passed in '97 and left me with a boy to raise and bills that didn't care. I was suddenly alone. That boy is David. My only child. Smart, sharp-tongued, good with numbers, terrible with people. He got a degree in business administration that nearly gave me ulcers from all the overtime I worked to afford his books. I'd clean extra floors, take weekend shifts, just so my son could have a future I never dared to dream for myself. He graduated with honors. I remember crying when I saw him in his gown. "You did it," I whispered, gripping his hand like he might float away. I thought maybe then he'd understand why I worked until my knees creaked like old floorboards. But life after graduation wasn't so magical. Jobs were hard to find. Connections mattered more than GPAs, and David didn't have many. He came home moody, frustrated, snapping at the smallest things. I stayed out of his way mostly, just made sure dinner was warm and that the fridge had his favorite juice. Then one morning, while scrubbing coffee stains off the break room counter at Braxton and Rowe, I overheard one of the supervisors mentioning an opening in the accounts department. My ears perked up like a hunting dog. Before she even finished her sentence, I was already mentally rehearsing my plea. That same afternoon, I swallowed my pride and knocked on Mr. Leland's door, the man I'd cleaned around for 12 years. I'd never spoken more than "good morning" to him, and suddenly I was in his office, begging like a child at a candy store. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe in him," I said. "My son, David, fresh degree, smart as a whip, he just needs a chance." Maybe it was pity, or maybe he finally looked at me for the first time as more than the lady who emptied his bins. But he agreed, said he'd see what he could do. 2 weeks later, David started work at Braxton and Rowe. I was over the moon. Cooked his favorite meal that night, okra stew with goat meat, just like my mother used to make. I even bought him a new tie. At first, everything seemed fine. He left early, came back late, complained about his coworkers like any office worker does. But then, something changed. One Thursday, they had some kind of staff brunch. I usually finished my duties by then, but I stayed a little longer that day, chatting with the other cleaning ladies in the hallway. That's when I saw it. David, standing beside Mr. Leland and a few executives, laughing, confident, and then, I swear, he looked right past me like he didn't know me. I waved. He looked away. Later that evening, as he slumped onto the couch scrolling through his phone, I brought it up gently. "David, I saw you today, at the brunch." He didn't even glance up. "Oh, yeah?" I waved. He paused. "Ah, sorry, I didn't see." A small thing, but the way he said it dismissive, like I was a nuisance, like I'd embarrassed him. A few days later, the real blow came. He told me not to come near the office during his lunch hour. Said he didn't want his coworkers seeing me in my uniform. "But I've worked there longer than you've been out of school," I said, trying to laugh it off. His face didn't change. "Just do me a favor, Mum. Don't say you're my mother if anyone asks. Just say you're, like, a housekeeper or something." I felt it in my bones. Like a cold wind blew through me. Like something cracked that couldn't be glued back. I nodded. I didn't say anything. Just walked into the kitchen and wiped the counter until my knuckles hurt. And here's the part that'll make you shake your head. I didn't confront him. Not then. Not even that week. I told myself maybe he was just trying to fit in. Maybe he was ashamed of the job, not of me. But I knew better. Still, I kept my mouth shut. Let him pretend. Let him keep up his little charade with his suits and his fake laughter and his LinkedIn updates. Until the day he crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Because sometimes life has a funny way of humbling those who think they've risen too far above the very people who gave them wings. Let me tell you something about mothers. Real mothers. We can take a lot. Disrespect, disappointment, even distance. But the one thing we can't stomach is when our child forgets where they came from. A few weeks after David gave me that little speech, telling me to pretend like I was just his housekeeper, I decided to stay quiet. Not because I was weak, but because sometimes silence gives people enough rope to hang themselves. Then came the charity luncheon. Every year, Braxton and Rowe hosts this fancy event for their top clients and stakeholders. Staff are expected to attend in their Sunday best. Cleaners like me? We stay out of sight. But we still set up the tables, polish the silver, make sure the restrooms are spotless. Always behind the scenes, like the stage crew in a play where the actors pretend the world revolves around them. That morning, I showed up early in my uniform, like I always do. Cleaned every bathroom till it gleamed like the sun. Arranged the napkins just the way the event planner liked. Folded into triangles, not squares. No one noticed. No one ever does. But that's not why I do it. Around 11 a.m., David walked in, wearing a tailored suit, shoes that clicked across the marble like he owned the place. And when he saw me, he flinched. Actually flinched, like I was a fly buzzing around his soup. "Hey, Mum," he whispered, pulling me aside near the maintenance closet. "Please, can you just keep a low profile today?" I smiled tightly. "You mean stay out of sight?" He shifted. "It's not like that. The regional director is here. He's the one who signs off on promotions. I don't want him getting the wrong idea." "What idea would that be?" I asked, even though I knew. That I'm from nothing. That word hit me like a slap. Nothing. I looked at my hands, still red from the bleach I'd used an hour ago to scrub someone else's mess. I had calluses older than some of his coworkers. But sure, nothing. He didn't even wait for my response. Just walked off, checking his reflection in the window glass as he went. Now I could have gone home, pretended I didn't hear it. But I didn't raise him to be ashamed of me, and I sure as rain wasn't about to start hiding now. So I stayed, did my job, laid out appetizers, picked up used napkins. Then, just before the guests arrived, I changed, brought a floral blouse and slacks from my tote bag, the same ones I wore to church, brushed my hair, put on some lipstick that had been sitting in my purse since Christmas, and I waited. David was standing with a group of people near the podium, laughing like he'd just told the world's funniest joke. I approached slowly, not to interrupt, just to do what I'd done 1,000 times, clear empty cups from the high-top tables. I reached for one and he spotted me. His eyes widened. He stepped in front of me like I was about to rob the place. "Oh, everyone, this is Margaret. She helps with the house. Housekeeping, right, Margaret?" Silence. Every face turned toward me, and in that moment I realized something. I could have played along, let him save face, let him pretend a little longer, but I didn't raise a liar, so I smiled at the group. "I'm David's mother. I've worked at Braxton and Rowe for 12 years, cleaned the building from top to bottom, and I got him this job." Dead silence. David's face went pale. like the blood just packed its bags and left his body. One of the executives, a tall woman with sharp cheekbones, tilted her head. "Wait, you're the cleaner? The one who asked Leland about the opening?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I was the one who put in the word for David. He's smart, deserved a chance." She turned to David. "You never mentioned that." He gave some weak smile and shrugged. "Didn't think it mattered." But it did, because after that the tone shifted. David tried to act normal the rest of the event, but I could tell he was spiraling, watching everyone carefully, trying to read if they were judging him. Spoiler alert, they were, and not because of me, but because of how he handled it. By the time I got home that night, he was already in his room, door shut. No apology, not even a glance. 2 days later, things took a turn. Apparently, David had gotten a bit too comfortable at work. Word had it he was condescending to junior staff, talking over managers in meetings, and recently got into a heated argument with the head of his department. Add that to the stunt at the luncheon. Let's just say karma has a schedule, and she was right on time. On Friday afternoon, I was wiping down the front lobby glass when Mr. Leland himself walked by. He stopped and looked at me for a long second. "Margaret," he said, "can I ask you something? Did your son ever mention how he got this job?" I smiled. "No, sir, but I imagine he took all the credit." He chuckled. "Not anymore. That night, David came home with a look I hadn't seen since he was a boy caught stealing biscuits. 'They're letting me go,' he said quietly. 'Probationary period. Said I wasn't a good fit.' I didn't say anything. He sat down slowly. 'Mom, can you call Mr. Leland? Just talk to him. Tell him it was a misunderstanding? Please?' Now, I won't lie to you. I wanted to laugh or yell, or remind him of the day he told me to pretend like I was hired help. But instead, I just looked at him and said, 'I'll think about it.' Because now he remembered who I was. You know, when you've been around as long as I have, 68 years and counting, you learn that life has a rhythm. People forget things. They take shortcuts. They mess up. But sooner or later, life circles back and makes everyone face the music. And I could hear that tune loud and clear the night David asked me to make that call. He looked like a boy again. Eyes wide, face pale, lips cracked like he hadn't had water in days. But this wasn't dehydration. This was fear. And not the kind of fear that comes from monsters under the bed. No. This was the fear of losing what he thought he deserved. I watched him sitting there, fidgeting on our worn-out sofa, the same one I used to nurse him on when he had colic. So many memories in those cushions, and now here he was, shattered by the weight of his own pride. "Please, Mum," he said again, softer this time. I sighed, stood up, and walked over to the kitchen. Put the kettle on. I always think better with tea. "I'll call him," I finally said. "But not tonight. You'll sleep on it first. You'll wake up tomorrow and write an apology letter. A real one. Not one of those fake office emails with 'regret the misunderstanding and it won't happen again' written by someone with no heart. You'll write like you mean it, like your job depends on it, because it does." He nodded. "And," I added, turning to look at him, "you're going to read it to me before you send it. Out loud, like you used to do with your school essays when you were trying to impress me." That night, he stayed up past midnight writing. I heard the backspace key 100 times. He cried once, too, I heard that. He thought I was asleep, but I've been a mother for decades. We don't sleep through those sounds. By morning, he looked like he hadn't slept a wink. But the letter was good, real, humble, and most importantly, it was his. At 9:06 a.m., I called Mr. Leland. "Margaret," he answered cheerfully. Didn't expect to hear from you. I told him everything, how David was raised, how hard he worked in school, how he wasn't perfect, but was willing to learn, and how sometimes pride can be a mask for fear. He listened, didn't interrupt. Then he chuckled softly. I figured as much, he said. Honestly, Margaret, I've seen dozens of kids like him, but the difference is none of them have a mother like you. He's lucky, though I doubt he knows how much. I thanked him, but before I could hang up, he added something that stayed with me. You know, he said, we don't need perfect employees. We need people who can learn, who can grow. And if your son is half the person you are, then I think he deserves a second chance. That afternoon, David got the call. Probation extended, a new manager assigned, and a warning. One more incident and he'd be out for good. He stood in the hallway after the call, holding his phone like it was a fragile egg. I got it back, he whispered. I nodded, placing a plate of toast and eggs on the table. Don't waste it. But you know what? That was just the beginning. Because what happened next was the real test. Not for him, but for me. See, when someone shows you who they are, you believe them. But what happens when they try to change? Do you give them a clean slate? Or do you make them scrub the one they stained? 2 weeks later, David asked if he could take me out to lunch. Just the two of us, at the cafe across from the office. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes right away either. I wanted to see if he meant it, or if it was just guilt talking. Turns out, it wasn't guilt. We sat by the window that day. He ordered soup and salad. I got my favorite, battered fish with chips and extra vinegar. And then, right there in the middle of that little cafe, David did something he hadn't done in years. He held my hand. I was ashamed, Mom, he said. Not of you, of myself, because I realized I spent all these years trying to run from where I came from. Thinking if I dressed right, spoke the right way, got a good title, I could forget I was the son of a cleaner. I didn't speak, just let him talk. But now I'm proud. You worked harder than anyone I've ever known. You carried both me and yourself when no one else would. And I treated you like a stranger. His eyes were glassy. I reached out, patted his hand. We all stumble. It's what you do after the fall that counts. He smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I saw my boy again. Not the suit, not the pride, just David. But don't think this is where it ends. Oh, no. Because the world has a funny way of twisting stories. And not even a month after that lunch, something happened at Braxton and Rowe that neither of us saw coming. Something that would test everything David had just rebuilt. And this time, it wasn't about me. There's a saying my grandmother used to tell me, the same water you boil an egg with can soften a potato. It's not the water, it's what you're made of. And let me tell you something. Life boiled our little pot again, and this time, we'd find out what David was really made of. It all started with a whisper in the staff room. You know how cleaners are. We see everything. We hear things no one realizes we're hearing. Some of the fanciest people treat us like wallpaper. Invisible. But I've always said, invisible people often carry the sharpest eyes. That morning, I was wiping down the countertops on the executive floor when I heard them. 2 junior analysts whispering over lukewarm coffee like they were trading national secrets. You hear about the client list leak? One said. Yeah, Leland's furious. IT traced it to someone in strategy. Strategy. That was David's department. Now, I'm not the type to panic, but my heart did this little flutter in my chest. I kept wiping, cool on the outside, boiling on the inside. By the end of the week, the rumor had legs, long ones. Apparently, someone had exported confidential client data to a private email address. The company lost 2 big contracts overnight. The higher-ups were sharpening knives. People were being questioned, and I watched my son walk into work every day, looking like a man on the edge of a cliff. Then it happened. Monday morning, 7:58 a.m. I'm sweeping the entryway when I hear Mr. Leland himself call David into the boardroom. Just his name, loud, firm, final. David didn't even look at me. He just walked in with his chin up and shoulders squared like he already knew. I finished my shift like always. Took the 4:15 bus home. Made dinner, curried cabbage and dumplings. He didn't show. Then at 9:12 p.m. my phone rang. It was him. Mum. His voice cracked like an old record. They think it was me. Now let me stop here and say, my son is not perfect. He's made stupid choices. He's lied to me before, skipped classes back in 6th form, and spent rent money on sneakers once when he was 23. But this? Leaking confidential files? No. Not my son. So I asked him, straight and calm, David, did you do it? He didn't hesitate. No, I swear on everything, Mum. I didn't. And just like that, the mama lion in me woke up. The next morning, I put on my good shoes, the sturdy ones with the rubber soles and no holes, and I marched into Braxton and Rowe, but I didn't storm into Leland's office. Oh no, I went to see someone far more valuable, Miriam. Miriam is head of IT security. She's about my age, kind eyes, never condescending, and she likes my banana bread. She was surprised to see me. Margaret? Everything all right? I just need to ask you a question quietly, I said. Can you double-check who really sent that client list? My son swears it wasn't him. She raised an eyebrow. You know I can't give out internal... I'm not asking you to tell me names. Just double-check. If you find something different, then do what you need to do. Maybe it was the desperation in my voice, or the fact that she knew me as more than just a cleaner. Either way, she promised to look, and look she did. That Friday, while I was mopping the back hallway, she came up to me. Didn't say much, just slipped me a folded note and walked off. I waited until my break, sat behind the loading dock, and opened it. IP address doesn't match David's work machine. He's clean, sent logs to HR. You didn't hear this from me. My hands trembled so hard I dropped the note. Relief flooded me, but right behind it came fire. Because if it wasn't David, then someone set him up. 2 days later, the real culprit was exposed. A young hotshot named Curtis, all charm and arrogance, had been emailing leads to a rival firm where his cousin worked. Slick little backdoor deals in exchange for a better job. And he almost let my son take the fall for it. He was fired on the spot. But what happened next? Now that's the part that caught me off guard. Mr. Leland called me into his office. Not David. Me. I walked in with my gloves still tucked in my waistband, sweat still on my brow. Margaret, he said, standing, please sit down. That was the first time in 22 years at Braxton Row someone offered me a chair in a corner office. I owe you an apology, he said. No, you don't, I replied. You just did your job, he smiled, and you did yours. But more than that, you protected your son and this company. That's not nothing. Then he leaned forward. We're restructuring the operations department. I want someone with eyes on the ground. Someone who knows people, not just their resumes. Someone I trust. I blinked. Are you offering me a promotion? Not just that, he said. I want you to be our new staff liaison manager. Title, salary, have office key, the whole package. Part-time hours, if you prefer. I sat there frozen. Me? The cleaner who once begged for an extra mop bucket? Might I ask why? I said. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. Because, Margaret, you see everything. And more importantly, you care. And just like that, the tables turned. But oh, child, this story ain't done yet. Because with my new position, I saw something even David hadn't seen. Something hiding right under our noses. And it was about to change everything. After all those years scrubbing marble floors and listening through walls, I was never meant to be near. You'd think I'd be used to secrets. But nothing prepared me for the one I overheard just 2 weeks into my new position. Let me backtrack a little. By the time David had cleared his name and that scheming Curtis was sent packing, there was a quiet respect growing between my son and me again. He hadn't apologized in words, not directly, but I didn't need it. I saw it in the way he brought me tea in the evenings, in the way he asked about my day before talking about his, even in the way he stopped hiding when I came by his department at work. But I also saw something else in him, an unease, a restlessness, like a man waiting for a storm that hadn't come yet. And then the storm arrived. It was late on a Thursday, almost 7 p.m., and I'd stayed behind to organize a training schedule for new hires, part of my new role as staff liaison manager. That still sounded fancy in my mouth. I had my own little corner cubicle now, next to HR, with a nameplate and everything. Never imagined my name would be carved in plastic like that. Anyway, the hallway was quiet. Most of the lights were off. I was just about to pack up when I heard 2 voices talking in the adjacent meeting room. The glass was frosted, door slightly ajar. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but the name that stopped me in my tracks? David. It was Mr. Lilland. And beside him, one of the big wigs from the parent company in New York, an American man named Robert Halley. He'd flown in for a few days and caused quite a stir. He's sharp, Robert was saying. Ambitious. He's got the numbers and the polish, but I'm just not sure about the pedigree. Lilland sighed. You mean the background? No, I mean the baggage. His mother works here, doesn't she? A cleaner, if I'm not mistaken. Silence, thick enough to chew. Then Lilland muttered, She's actually more than that now. Robert cut him off. Still, it could complicate things. Perception matters. Clients like a clean story. They don't need to know their account manager's mother mopped the lobby last year. I froze. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. That's the part that broke me. Somewhere deep down, I already knew that the world saw me as less than. I'd just forgotten, or maybe hoped David had too. Then Robert added, if he wants that promotion in Manhattan, he'll need to distance himself. No more family ties, especially not visible ones. I felt the cold of the tile through my shoes, like all the warmth had drained from my bones. The next day, David called in sick. He didn't mention anything, just stayed in his flat all day, curtains drawn, avoiding me. But I already knew what had happened. He'd been offered the job, the promotion, the transfer, the big leap to New York, the golden ticket. And the price? Me. I waited 3 days before saying anything. 3 whole days of polite conversation and dodged eye contact. Then finally, I sat him down at my kitchen table, same one where I used to make him do his math homework while I cooked stew, and said, Are you going to take it? He blinked. What? The job in Manhattan. He stared at me. You know? I nodded slowly. I do. He opened his mouth to speak, but I stopped him with one raised hand. Don't lie, David. I'm too old and too tired to pretend anymore. That's when he broke. I didn't ask for this, Mum, he said. I didn't want to have to choose. You don't have to choose, I said. But you do have to decide who you are. His voice dropped. They don't want me if they know about you. And do you want them if they ask you to be ashamed of me? He couldn't answer that. He just stared down at his hands like they belonged to someone else. I raised you, I told him. I fed you from my tips. I kept your school shoes dry in the rain, and I cleaned that building so you could walk in there with your head held high. I took his hand. I am not your shame. I am your foundation. Tears welled up in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, David cried. Not like a man, but like a son. He didn't go to New York. He turned the job down. Leland was stunned. Robert was furious. But David stood tall and told them, if a job requires me to be ashamed of where I come from, it's not a job I want. You see, child, the real promotion wasn't that Manhattan office. It was right there at my kitchen table when my son remembered who he was. But don't think that's where the story ends, because after all that sacrifice, another door opened, and this time, it was for me. The day David turned down the promotion to Manhattan was the day I finally exhaled. Not because I wanted him to lose an opportunity, no, I'd have packed his suitcase myself if it was right for him. But I was proud like only a mother can be, that he remembered where he came from and who stood behind him. Still, something shifted that week, like life was adjusting its course, quietly, deliberately. It started with a call. It was a rainy Wednesday morning. I was sipping my tea in the staff lounge, trying to stretch 5 minutes of peace before my next meeting with HR, when my mobile buzzed. I almost ignored it. I don't like taking personal calls during work, but the number on the screen had too many zeros to ignore. Private international caller. I picked up with a cautious, hello? A deep, cheerful voice answered, Mrs. Adu, this is Grace from the Zurich office. Zurich, Switzerland. I blinked. Switzerland? She chuckled warmly. Yes, ma'am. You were recommended to us by Mr. Leyland. I sat straighter. Recommended for what exactly? An open consulting position with our diversity and inclusion program. We're seeking someone who can offer grounded insight on socioeconomic barriers in corporate environments, specifically from the perspective of long-term internal staff. I nearly dropped my cup. She continued, your work, your transition from janitorial to internal liaison, your background, all of it speaks volumes about resilience and systemic understanding. Mr. Alf, Leland spoke very highly of your initiative and integrity. We'd like to fly you out for an initial discussion. Expenses covered, of course. I sat in silence, stunned. When I finally managed to speak, I asked one question. Is this about David? She paused. Actually, it's not. This is about you. Let me tell you, at 68, you stop expecting life to throw you anything but hip pain and bills. I never dreamed I'd need a passport again. But there I was, a month later, standing in Zurich, the air crisp, and the mountains like watercolor in the distance. I shared my experience in front of a panel of executives, talked about invisible workers, cultural silence, dignity in labor, and the pain of having your own child ashamed of your apron. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't dramatize it either. They listened. 2 weeks after that, I was offered a hybrid role, global consultant for workplace inclusion, based primarily in London, but traveling quarterly. It came with a beautiful office, a full benefits package, and, of all things, an assistant. I cried when I saw my new nameplate. Mrs. Esther Adu, Senior Inclusion Advisor. It was the first time my name had ever been typed in bold and hung on a door. When I told David, he stared at me like he was 6 again and I just pulled a coin from behind his ear. Mum, he whispered, stunned. That's amazing. I smiled at him. You know, the funny thing about people who pretend not to see cleaners, David, is that we hear everything. He laughed through his nose, sheepishly, and hugged me. I'm sorry, Mum, for all of it. I patted his back. I know, and I forgave you a long time ago, but I'll still make you scrub your own kitchen next time I visit. Now don't get me wrong, life isn't some fairy tale. I still get aches in my knees. I still worry about bills. And sometimes when I mop my own floor at home, I remember what it felt like to be invisible. But I'm not anymore. And neither is David. He stayed in London, by the way. He got another offer. Not as flashy, but more honest. A company that didn't care where I worked or what shoes I wore, just whether he could deliver results. He's thriving, we're healing, and every time I walk into my new office, I think about that day, when he asked me to pretend to be his housekeeper, and I smile, because I was his housekeeper, his caretaker, his mother. And now I'm the woman they call when they finally realize people like me were never beneath them. We were just waiting for them to look up.